Yesterday, I interviewed Jenna Poste, who works with Unplugged Nova Scotia, and they're a group that actually works together to make sure that kids are having safer access to the internet and that they're not introduced to phones and technology at such an early age. And they host workshops, and they work with the RCMP too, just to make sure that kids are really being safe online and to talk to parents about the risks and, the negative connotations that kind of come along with that. So last night they actually had a workshop, and I talked to Jenna just to learn a little bit what Unplugged is all about and what this workshop was about and who can go and what it's all about. So we'll take a listen to that. So just to start off, for people that aren't very familiar with the work that you guys do at Unplugged Nova Scotia, what kind of things does your work oversee and kind of do?
Sure. So Unplugged Canada is really a grassroots parent movement whose sort of mission is to help advocate and educate parents on the impact of smartphones and social media on children's development. And so we're trying to help advocate for parents to understand more about this technology and consider delaying the introduction of it to their children as long as possible, and to really kind of create a collective movement and a community around this, to know that parents aren't alone in this. I think we all feel like we know that they're seeing the impacts this is starting to have on kids, and there's a lot more research and data coming out on the impacts. And so we're here to sort of help provide some resources, some support, and encourage parents to sort of pledge to delay and kind of support each other in making some change and shift the culture of what we've kind of established right now as a very phone-based childhood in our society.
Right. And so you're holding a workshop tonight hosted by the RCMP about smartphone and technology safety. Can you tell me a little bit more about how the workshop looks and what kind of topics it will be covering?
Sure, yeah. It's tonight. It's 6:30, and we're hosting it both in person at the Canada Game Centre in the boardroom, as well as if you're not local or not able to make in person, there is a Zoom registration as well that you can watch live online. And, we're collaborating with the RCMP, specifically the Community Action Response Team, and we're trying to, again, just sort of help parents be aware of some of the kind of risks online for kids that I think many parents may not be aware of. And a lot of the topics that they're going to kind of dive into are related to cyberbullying, unfortunately the rise of sextortion, especially in Canada as well, the risks when kids do share intimate images with each other or with strangers, child luring, and some specific initiatives that the RCMP is actually going through right now to sort of tackle these issues in our backyard here in Nova Scotia.
And so is this workshop available for just parents or just children, or can both come?
It's more specifically targeted to parents. I think we've had a couple events where some, older adolescents came along and they actually found it really valuable. So I would say it's really open to anybody. Our target's kind of parents as well as educators, caregivers, anybody who maybe is, has a young child in their life and wants to be able to help protect them more online.
Right. And so as technology is becoming more and more accessible or used a whole lot more in children, what are the kind of negative impacts that we're seeing that have been coming along with this?
Well, there's a number. I mean, I think one of the key things is that these are really fueling a mental health crisis in our kids. Fortunately, the rates of depression, anxiety, self-harm, and even suicide have dramatically spiked since about 2010, when smartphones started to get introduced widespread into children's lives. So we're seeing things like, 133% increase in visits to the ER for young girls for self-harm injuries. We're seeing, kids with problematically smart use having three times more likely to have depression. There's also just the exposure of the content that they're seeing on these devices, and many times unintentionally. Like, unfortunately, these devices and many of the apps out there are intentionally kind of guiding kids to more extreme and harmful content. And kids are getting exposed to things that we never dream of exposing to them this young as parents. And they're also just designed to be addictive. It's designed to capture attention. It's fragmenting our kids' attention and our own attention spans. And it's leading to kids spending, 6, 7, 8 hours a day online, which they're not spending interacting in person, building relationships, building communication skills. And overall, again, it's exposing them to Unfortunately, people online who aren't necessarily have the best intentions. We've done a lot to overprotect our kids in the real world, and we've not done enough to really protect them online. In Canada alone, there was 7,000 reports of kids being sexually extorted online in the last 2 years, and that's just reported cases. And many kids, share that they're getting targeted by, sexual offenders online every single day across some of these major platforms. So, all of that kind of leads to, these phones have really changed childhood. Many of our kids, these are blocking experiences. They're not outside engaging in the real world as much. They're not spending as much time with their friends anymore. And that continues to inhibit them from growing into fully functioning adults.
Right. And so, you listed all those kind of negative impacts that come along with the technology use. I'm just kind of curious, what are some of the alternatives that parents might want to take into account rather than using the technology for their kids?
Yeah, I think what's become the default, and I'll say I honestly thought this myself until about a year ago, is that you don't have to default to giving your kid your old iPhone or your smartphone. If you need them to maybe get in touch with them, if they're getting some independence and you want to be able to communicate with them, give them a simple phone that doesn't have those apps on there. Even getting a home phone. So we've, in our own household, our kids are only 5 and 7, but we already got one just because if there was ever an emergency, like that is way easier for them to navigate than trying to get into my cell phone, which they don't even know how to. They're calling their friends and having these cute little conversations where they have to learn phone etiquette and how to leave a voicemail. Again, as those kids kind of need more independence, and you need to maybe check in. There's things like some smartphone or smart watches that are designed for parents and kids that, again, limit distraction, but provide maybe that ability for parents to know where they are and be able to send simple messages to improve contacts. And then there's even some incredible products being introduced. In Canada, there's the Pinwheel phone, which looks just like a smartphone, and it can have some of the, very beneficial applications like education-wise or communication, music that, aren't necessarily harmful to kids. But you cannot get social media or an open browser on that device. It is not possible. It's built with a custom operating system. And so, that is an option that parents can consider, whether they've just recently given their kids a phone and maybe want to roll it back a little bit, or whether they are considering when the kid is ready to give them something. That is an amazing tool to start them with, because navigating all of those parental controls on iPhones and even Android phones are difficult, and kids have figured out a ton of ways to get around them, and it just becomes kind of a whack-a-mole for a parent to just continue to try to close those gaps and try to keep them safe.
Right. And why do you think it's so important for both kids and their parents to be well informed about the dangers of using technology so young?
Well, I think it is important that the kids get, a part of this conversation and they understand it, because I feel like with conversations I've had, when kids are brought into that and they're educated on how this is going to affect their sleep, how it affects their mental health, how it affects their attention, they tend to get more on board on it. And I think parents also need to consider their own habits. They look to you to model your behavior. And so I think we all need to kind of take a look at our own use of our smartphones. Myself have taken a lot of stock into being more aware of my use in front of my kids. I turn off my notifications for non-urgent things. I put phone limits on certain applications just to make sure I don't spiral down, that hole in social media. And if I am using it in front of my kids, I try to narrate what I'm doing. In many cases for adults, it's very much a communication tool. So I'm talking to a person at work who needs my help. I'm messaging your friend's mom to see if they're free to play later. I'm looking at the recipe for dinner. So I try to tell them what I'm doing so they don't just, think that I'm just distracted looking at something online. Many times it is a tool for parents, but be open with that communication and be open and aware, especially as kids are going to get more access, that they need to be, aware of what could be coming at them and try to be critical in analyzing, is this who they think they are talking to? If they do see something, make sure they have an open dialogue with you to come talk to you about it. That's really important to make sure we're educating kids on how to keep themselves safe and how they can take an action if they are caught in a situation that's uncomfortable.
Right. And do you think there's anything important that we haven't touched on in this conversation that you think listeners might want to get in the know on?
I think the biggest thing is just go have a conversation with your kids' closest friends' parents. I can guarantee you many of them are probably feeling, similar concern around this topic. Depending on what age it is, it might be a different conversation as to whether it's how do we work together to roll some things back, or getting ahead of it before they're asking for a phone and say, hey, what are your thoughts on this? This is what I'm feeling. Share resources with each other, support each other. And I think you'd be surprised how many people are concerned about this. This has been something that's been brewing the last year, and around the world we're seeing legislation come in to support this. We saw the cell phone ban here in Nova Scotia come into play this year. There's more conversations going to continue to limit that potentially further around the world. So I think just people need to just start talking and have an open conversation. Try to, come at it in a way that's not judgmental, because you never know where people are at. But I truly believe the more people are informed, the more they realize kind of the risks that are there, and they don't necessarily outweigh the benefits this technology can provide.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Jenna, for talking to me today. It was great to speak with you.
Thank you so much for having me.